Hello and welcome to another one of the my sessions with regards to talking about ArcSight ESM and some of the troubleshooting options that are available to you. This time I'm actually going to be talking about Logfu on ESM itself. I did a previous session talking about Logfu, the ability to process and visualize the log data and see what's going on with the system on a connector level. You can actually do this at the ESM manager level as well and see some of the information as well. It collates it into a session-based view of what the data is. Now, I'm actually running this on my virtual machine here, and you can see the system will actually generate a good number of log files themselves with regards to the operating of the system. So we can see the status, the standard out, the pulse, and so on. And it'll actually process the log data into something useful. For reference, just so you know, you can adjust and configure the log properties themselves. You'll actually find it in the server defaults property file, found it in the ArcSight manager config folder itself, and you can actually see the information there. So there's a whole load of settings there. I'm not going to go through in detail. The useful ones are, for example, 10 actual files of 10 megabytes each for the actual data that we'll be storing for the log messages. Hence the reason why we have nothing and then one right the way through to 9. So that's the 10, and they're maximum of 10 megabytes before they rotate and move on from there. So what I'm actually doing, I'm going to be using Logfu as the mechanism to do that, and it just gives me some simple data we can look at and use. I'm actually going to run it here. So if I actually run the actual file, I just need to talk about this for a second. You have to run it from the folder itself where the log data is stored. So that will actually be the logs/default folder as you find in your ArcSight manager folder itself. I'll talk about that more in a little bit in a minute. But you actually have to then go traverse directory back to the bin folder where you can run the ArcSight wrapper and then run the Logfu extension for that itself. So just be aware that you have to do it this way. It actually looks in the current folder for those log files and actually processes them from there. So we'll just start the running of that, and you can see it instantly starts running and processes through those log data files themselves. You can actually see that you will get occasional errors, and that's okay. There's a huge amount of data in there. One good thing about the ArcSight solution as a whole is it does generate a good amount of log messages for it to process, but we're not seeing a huge number of error messages there. You actually see that it's actually going through the previous messages as well, so 6, 5, and 4 there, and it's going through and stepping through and piecing together the sessions that are available to that. I will be honest and mention that this is actually running on a virtual machine that I use for demonstration purposes, so it's not running all the time, so I don't have consistent and continuous sessions. So my data and my plot information will be a little bit limited, but I'll talk about that when we actually come to it. What the system is going to do is going to continue to process and finish off generating a HTML report of all the data, and it's actually going to do that in the background, which is great. But what it does do is it gives me the ability to view a chart. It's not brilliantly useful at this point, but it does allow me to, for example, if I just right mouse click show event window for the plot, and I can just pop that up there just while it's processing, and I can see things like the low and high memory usage for the GC referring to the garbage collection, so the memory pooling and returning to the memory pool available for it. So just so you can see what's going on, we can see that there's the low memory and high memory usage. So we've obviously had a high memory usage there. It's kind of hit the peak, and then we've done a garbage collection and returned it low. So we can see that things are going on there, and it's a relatively useful way to see that. And we can actually plot that against the sessions itself, the most recent sessions, and see what's going on. Like I say, not brilliantly useful. The HTML side is much more useful, and I'll talk about that in a second. That's a bit more relevant to what we want to do. So if I actually just quit out of that, we can actually see that the HTML file folder has been created here. Of course, I could actually just zip that up, run that on a desktop browser and so on, and just copy the whole folder. I can actually view that from this Linux virtual machine itself. So if I just go and open the particular file. So just again to mention, when you run the Logfu command itself, you actually have to be in the folder for the log data itself. So that's in typically it's in opt ArcSight manager logs default. So you'll see all that, and you'll see the actual log files there. It then creates this Logfu folder itself. So I go into there, and there's my HTML file, and I open that, and then we get the data. So we can see that there's been a number of sessions, and I can jump to those sessions, and we can see what's going on there and with relevant data. What you get with each of those sessions, you'll get some information. What was the data in the log? We'll get what we call famous last words. So what are the last messages in the log file that are the most relevantly processed? So we can see some high-level information there. We'll see what's going on with regards to memory utilization and so on. That's not particularly useful for these sessions because these are ones that are relatively empty of data. So if I actually jump to ones that have got a little bit more useful data in there, so for example, if I can look at this one, I can see in this particular session it was done over 41 minutes. Longest garbage collection was around 1 second. There's the famous last words, and we can see some plot information here with regards to what's going on. So we can see what's known as the idle time. So if I just show that, so it's idle, we can see the I/O wait time, the user and system time as well. So broadly that maps quite nicely. In general, it was a demonstration. I wasn't doing a huge amount, and that the user and I/O wait times are approximately the same, so yeah, not a huge amount. It's not really doing it much at that point. It is kind of scattered, so I probably want to look into what was going on at those particular times, but the point is it gives me a guide to what's going on. Now I do know that there are some other sessions in here with a lot more relevant data, so if I just scroll down to those so we can see some of that data as well. So here we can see it's only a limited amount of time here. It's plotted on a graph here. We can see that the I/O time is quite bad. So clearly I've been doing an awful lot here, and clearly I am waiting predominantly for the I/O to catch up with what I'm actually trying to process at that time. So again, if I look down, it doesn't seem to be a memory issue. It doesn't seem to be a event insertion time. It's not particularly great, but it's not terrible at that point. But I probably want to investigate why I'm seeing some of this I/O wait time as part of this. So that's not great, and it's something I need to do some investigation on. And we can see that we do that for each one of those sessions, and that's a little bit longer session again, so we can see things have been run over. In this case, it's a good couple of hours. We can see that when the system was started, it's a big spread out there, lots of I/O wait as we're waiting for the system to fully start. Once it has started, we can see that I've been running, for example, some reports and some overall sessions as part of what I've been doing as well. So we see a fairly close matching of the data, and it then gives me some pointers to dig into on the log data and say, well, why is there an issue around about the 1140 to 1150 period here? Let me dig into the log messages and what was I doing at that time, and what kind of messages am I seeing in the actual log files that give me an indication of what might be the issue as part of that. And it could be a report, it could be a rule, it could be something scheduled that I'm running within a system, and allows me to identify and optimize that accordingly. So that's a very quick run through of the Logfu capabilities on the ESM Manager and some of the features that allow you to do some troubleshooting and some visualization of the log data itself to make a better understanding of the data that we have collected as part of the log messages from a troubleshooting and administration point of view. Thank you very much.